Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I'd like to welcome you all to our fourth webinar series on how to maximise grant funding opportunities to help energy efficiency programmes. I'm sure there is lots of interest in regards to funding opportunities, especially as we're going to talk about today some of the wider challenges that local authorities and social housing providers are going to be facing over the next few years. Today I'm joined with our brand new asset management consultant, Gary Miller. So welcome on board, Gary. It is great to have you here. Just a little bit of background about Gary, everybody. So I would call Gary an expert when it comes to grant funding opportunities. So he's got lots of knowledge which he's going to impart to you today. And at the end of the session, we're going to have some Q&A. So please stick around. Try and maximise your take-off from this webinar today, because hopefully it should give you the opportunities and the tools that you need to start kickstarting your energy efficiency programmes. So without further ado, welcome, Gary, and I'm going to hand over to you.
Hi everyone, thanks for that. Welcome there, Dave. I'm excited to be here with M4, and for any of you here today, you're getting to witness my first public outing as an asset management consultant for M4. So as Dave said, the purpose of today's webinar is to discuss how you can maximise grant funding opportunities to help your energy efficiency programmes. So we're looking to provide information and generate a bit of discussion around about grant funding, types that are out there for housing associations and local authorities to utilise, how grant funding can be used to maximise the impact of your programmes, and also how to maximise your opportunity to secure funding. So here's the topics that we're going to cover today. So we're going to be looking, as I said, at delivering greater impact with your grant funding. We're going to cover a number of the schemes that are there, and then we're going to try and bring this to life. We've got a number of case studies there, which are real world examples of projects that are using the funds that we're going to talk about today and some of the approaches that we're going to cover. And we're also going to look a little bit about M4's role and what we're currently doing and how we can support. And as Dave said, we're going to close out with a bit of a Q&A session. So in terms of using grant funding to deliver impact on your programmes, the cost of delivering energy efficiency programmes has increased significantly over the last 12 to 18 months. There's lots of issues around Brexit and pandemic which have an effect on the cost and availability of materials and labour. And we've also seen the introduction of some new quality standards, PAS 2035 and PAS 2030-2019. They've both brought along additional delivery costs, both in terms of enhanced specifications that are required for properties, and the additional coordination and the different roles that go into that, such as the retrofit coordinator and retrofit assessor. So costs going up, it's important to generate as much additional funding as you can. So a lot of the schemes we're going to discuss today are match funding. There's a lot of opportunity there for 50-50 match funding. So if we can halve the cost of your capital budget, surely we can double the impact. It's not quite as easy as that, but there are a number of ways that we think that reducing your capital costs can certainly help you to have more impact. Some of those are the opportunity to deliver more properties under a single programme, an opportunity to deliver a wider range of measures at the same time to the same properties. And that's quite good as well, because it reduces the impact on your tenants, so it makes it easier for access and reduces the amount of disruption that they might have to put up with. There's also certain economies there that can be realised as well. So if you're going to be doing external wall insulation, solar panels, re-roofing, rather than having scaffolding up at 3 separate times, for example, if you just have it up once. There's also opportunity to include multiple tenures within your projects as well. Some of the schemes that we're going to talk about today are private funding, and the opportunity there is to remove blockers in blocks of flats, avoid the scenario with terraced houses where you might have 1 or 2 missed out, or even just extending the offer you've got up to the whole community, so increasing the impact that you're having as well, again. These funding opportunities, they do provide an opportunity to test innovative approaches. The schemes are not for research and development, they're all for market-ready measures, but as we'll know, every now and again a new measure or a new approach will come along that's market-ready but not had a huge amount of real-life delivery experience. Now, where the Scottish Government are happy to fund those approaches, that sort of kind of halves the financial risk involved in taking those chances and trying something new. And it will also give the opportunity to gather real-life data and inform learnings for future investments. It can also support the acquisition of the cost of acquiring some external delivery support where that's required. So it may be that you need someone to come in and help you with stock analysis, H2 analysis. You may wish to independently appoint a past 2035 retrofit coordinator, independent from your past contractor, or you may want to bring in an employer's agent to look after all of that for you. Another thing that the funding can be used for is enhanced tenant engagement. That's really good as well, because if you're able to promote the benefits of the project and what its purpose is, and especially the benefits to them and to the organisation, the community, the environment, it can often help with maximising participation and facilitating access to properties, which can often be a challenge. But this also relates to advice that can be given after the installation of energy conservation measures. Behavioural advice relating to how to use appliances, how to use heating and how to use ventilation within the home, which can help to maximise the impact of the energy conservation measures that have been installed. Anyone that's been involved in insulating the walls of anyone's house will probably have heard someone joke at some point that 6 months later you return to these houses and everyone's got their windows open and shorts and t-shirt on rather than turning down the thermostat. So little things like that can help to enhance the impact of your programme, and anything you can do to demonstrate the impact and demonstrate how that funding is going to allow you to do more than you would have done without it is a good thing. So these are the grant schemes that we're going to cover today. We're going to cover the Energy Company Obligation, Energy Efficient Scotland area-based schemes, Social Housing Net Zero Heat Fund, Social Housing Net Zero Heat Fund Development Funding, and the Heat Network Fund. So we're going to cover these schemes in quite high level, rather than getting into the exact nitty-gritty of all of them. We're going to be looking at what the schemes are about and the issues that they try to address, such as fuel poverty and decarbonisation. But a theme through this whole session today is about how these are interlinked and there's opportunities to address both at the same time. We'll talk about eligibility, both in terms of the organisations and the individuals who can receive funding, the types of projects and the types of energy conservation measures that will be considered. Excuse me. So we're going to cover the key points of all of these schemes and attempt to give you enough information to allow consideration and provoke some thought. Most of these schemes are Scottish Government funding. There's an exception there with the Energy Company Obligation. It's a UK-wide scheme. And most of these schemes relate to social housing, so funding for social housing providers, but also funding for private and private rented sector schemes and looking at how those can be integrated. So the Energy Company Obligation, ECO. So the overview of this scheme is that it's a government scheme aimed at supporting low-income and vulnerable energy customers. The scheme has been designed to reduce energy bills and carbon emissions by supporting the cost of retrofit in existing homes. So BEIS, the Department for Business, Energy, Industrial Strategy, are responsible for the scheme. They'll conduct consultations to find out what's needed and gauge opinions on the different options they're presenting. They will set the strategy, the targets, the measures that are available, all those kind of things. The scheme is administered by Ofgem, so they'll be responsible for administering claims. They're responsible for compliance and inspections. And the reason that the energy companies are noted down the bottom there, as you might guess, with the Energy Company Obligation, it is led by the utility companies. This is not all of the companies that provide that. The obligation or the requirement to provide ECO does change from time to time. It's really to do with how many customers they have. Understanding from the next round of ECOs that's going to be lowered a bit to bring some of the smaller utilities on board with ECO. We all pay for this though. As much as it's led by the utilities, it is funded by a levy on the energy bill, so we all pay for it, and as do all social housing tenants. I have mixed feelings on eco. I think that it does a lot of good. I think that because all of us are paying for it, and the people within our properties and our communities are paying for it, it's important to try and lever that and utilise it. Sometimes when you're making, especially particularly private housing, if there's a bit of a contribution to be made, that eco funding can really help to reduce that. And it's also important from the Scottish Government point of view. They want to see housing providers and project managers securing funding from multiple sources where they can to maximise the impact. The reason I have mixed feelings about that is because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for everyone involved, and compared with some of the other schemes, it does offer some slightly lower amounts of grant funding. But as I say, it is important to be trying to secure it. Now, the energy company obligation has been running since 2013. We're now in the third phase of ECO, or ECO 3 as it's known, and that's due to end this month. What exactly is happening after that in ECO 4 is still to be confirmed. I am going to go on and talk a little bit now about what was possible under ECO 3 and talk about some of what we know from the ECO 4 consultation that's been published, and we can see the direction that the scheme's going to take. So, ECO 3 eligibility. The scheme, as we just discussed, it's there to support fuel poor households. They will support owner-occupiers, private tenants and social tenants. It is based on the household circumstances. And there are some restrictions on the social housing and the private rented sector. For example, on the private rented side of things, there's some restrictions on what measures can be installed based on the energy efficiency rating of the home. And for social housing, support is limited to EPC bands E, F and G. So that's irrespective of the tenant circumstances. The main route to qualify for ECO is really to be able to demonstrate a need, or be able to demonstrate some evidence there's a risk of fuel poverty within the home. There's 3 eligibility strands under ECO. There are the home heating cost reduction obligation, which we'll focus on just now, the local authority flexibility schemes, and the solid wall infill scheme. So the main route for tenant eligibility is through the home heat cost reduction obligation. You might have heard this being called a couple of other things. It's often called the tenants, the group of people that qualify are often called the affordable warmth group or the help to heat group. So a member of the household has to be part of that help to heat group to qualify. And that's defined by receipt of certain benefits. Generally, the benefits are means tested, or it demonstrates some form of vulnerability which is affected by living in a cold home. To evidence that, there's a couple of ways. A DWP check can be done by the organisation who are seeking to get the ECO funding, and if that comes back as a match, that's automatic qualification, or evidence can be used from the household. Now, the local authority flexible eligibility scheme, easy for me to say, or EcoFlex. Now, this scheme was introduced under ECO 3, and what this does is it allows local authorities a bit of flexibility in trying to determine who they think is at risk of fuel poverty and who can be supported. There's quite a lot of evidence that shows that not every fuel poor home is in receipt of benefits. And that's where the EcoFlex scheme comes in and tries to plug that gap. So you can set different criteria based on income, based on health conditions, local knowledge. There is guidance from BASE about what sort of low income or low income vulnerable to the cold criteria can be considered. But as I say, there is quite a bit of flexibility there. Excuse me. Local authorities do need to publish a statement of intent. So this is where they set out their strategy for supporting fewer pool homes within their council area. And all the eligibility criteria goes in there as well. The local authority also need to sign a declaration for every measure that's installed, and that's confirmation that they've vetted that and they're comfortable that it meets the criteria set out in their statement of intent. Now, because of that, a lot of local authorities, so I think the majority at the moment, are really just using that to support their own delivered scheme. There's some concern there about signing over declarations for eco funding where there's no procurement, no quality assurance, no customer care that's controlled by the local authority. And the other option we've got for securing funding under Eco3 is the solid wall infill. That's part of the EcoFlex scheme. Basically what this is for supporting blockers, so blocks of flats where 100% of the sign up might be required for energy conservation measures like external wall insulation or cavity wall insulation. It can help to fill in those gaps because you just have to have a percentage majority of people within the block that are fuel poor for those that are not fuel poor in between to help, and that can have a really big impact on being able to get people invested and on board with a scheme. This also supports where you've got other types of buildings, so terraced houses is a good example. We all try and avoid that situation. I'm using external wall insulation as an example again, but where you would have a row of terraced houses where most of them have been done and there's just one house in the middle that gets missed out, which I'm sure frustrates us all. The other thing that happened within Eco3 and has been adopted as a requirement is the introduction of the PAS 2030 2019 and PAS 2035 standards. So they are now a requirement for receiving eco funding for measures that are installed, and the Scottish Government have also adopted these standards as well. So within their programmes they're looking for everything to be done to these standards too. There's been quite a lot of chat about that, so people probably know a little bit about this, but the 2030 2019 standard, that sets out the way in which retrofit installations should be carried out. And PAS 2035 is more of a specification for the approach for whole house retrofit. It covers the whole of the project life cycle, from initial engagement with the client through to the assessment, design, installation and evaluation. And evaluation is important as well, that validation really that what you set out to do has been achieved, and the energy conservation measures that you're installing are performing as you would like them to. That has brought along higher costs, and it has brought along some uncertainty as well. So a number of different approaches being trialled, but one of the things that we are talking about through this session today is that these will increase your costs. They are a requirement. They do bring a lot of benefits in terms of the quality of the outcome and the considerations that are given to what's installed and how and when. So it's good to estimate some additional costs for those into your programme. So in terms of Eco4, there was a consultation for this launched last year, ran from July to September 21. There's some changes in there, but the focus of it stays the scheme the same. The main objective of the scheme is to improve the energy efficiency of the least efficient housing stock. And it's occupied by low income and vulnerable households. Some of the bigger changes that we're seeing though is the introduction of requirements to increase EPC bands to a certain level to receive the full amount of eco, which I'll cover in a bit more detail in a moment. And also that approach is supporting whole house, and they've also limited the funding now to EPC bands D, E, F and G. So we'll no longer be able to include EPC bands A, B and C within that. And another step that they're taking to really make sure that the least efficient housing is tackled is to introduce a minimum target for the eco suppliers. So they'll have a target for how many of the poorest performing, how many E, F and G rated properties they have to target. So to support the whole house retrofit, we're now going to be talking about within eco project scores and minimum requirements. So to receive the full project score or the most eco funding that's available for your project, you must meet the minimum requirements. Now those minimum requirements really relate to what the existing EPC band is and where you need to take it to. So at the moment, if you've got a proper under Eco4, what's been proposed, if you have a property that's band F or G, they have to be treated to improve them to at least a band D. And any which are currently band D and E must be treated and improved to at least a band C. So some other things that have been brought in, we talked before about the solid wall infill, where you don't have to have everyone in the building or row of terrace properties in fuel poverty to secure funding for them all. And that's now going to be extended to cavity wall insulation in blocks of flats. It's been recognised that the same challenge exists there. And I just wanted to add a little note in. There was a reminder in there that under the Scotland Act 2016, Scottish ministers have been provided with powers to design and implement eco in Scotland, which includes setting rules about the types of household and measures which would be eligible. But when I was researching, I couldn't find any further information on that just now. So it doesn't seem like it's clear at the moment if the Scottish Government will do anything different themselves with eco. So the Eco4 scheme is due to start from next month, and there's a lot of that still up in the air. So there will be an interim period where they'll allow early delivery that suppliers will sort of carry on doing what they're doing just now. So the next scheme we wanted to discuss is the Scottish Government's Energy Efficient Scotland area-based schemes, which aim to remove poor energy efficiency as a driver for fuel poverty, achieving an EPC rating of C or better by 2030 for eligible homes. Now, this funding is Scottish Government grant funding. It is awarded to local authorities. It is for private and private rented sector only, with some restrictions to private centre rented eligibility. The scheme looks to remove poor energy efficiency as a driver by installing a range of insulation, low carbon heating and microgeneration measures. It was really good last year to see that measures like air source heat pumps and solar photovoltaic panels have been added as named measures. They're now a standard part of the scheme, and it's been recognised that they have a role to play in Scotland. Interestingly, what's not been added yet though is battery storage systems. So these are permitted. I've had experience myself of being successful with applications like that, but they do need to be done under a special project application under ABS. You just have to explain a little bit more what the impact is. Eligibility for the scheme is quite similar to ECO in that it focuses on poorest performing homes and most vulnerable households. So there's criteria around all of those that need to be met. This can get a little bit complicated at times, especially where there's that area of element of flexibility involved, where Scottish Government can the Scottish Government give the local authorities to an extent the ability to design the schemes specific for those areas. But some of the kind of key requirements in terms of properties themselves, the properties must be council tax bands A, B or C. Council tax band D can sometimes be supported if the EPC rating is E, F or G. Some of the ways that you can demonstrate the household eligibility, sometimes it's possible to do it on an area based approach, like the name of the scheme suggests. Some of the ways that you can do that is by demonstrating the area that you're targeting is in the bottom 25% of SIMD, Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation. It's also possible to use statistics from the Scottish Housing Conditions Survey, where it will give levels of fuel poverty in a given area, and that can be used to show what the percentage of fuel poverty in that area looks like compared with the average within the local authority or the average within Scotland. So higher levels are a good way to demonstrate need. It's also possible to do that on an individual basis as well, where you can look at the income, the benefits, the health conditions of the householders that actually live in there. So as I said, so for owners on a background, private sector tongue-tied today, owner-occupied and private rented sector only. The reason it's in here though is that the Scottish Government do encourage partnership approaches. So the little quote there at the bottom is taken straight from the guidance to local authorities, stating that councils should aim to work with housing associations and other local stakeholders to identify and deliver projects. So I've had a lot of experience that with myself in other roles where there's been an area where there's been a mix of owner-occupied, private rented sector, council, housing association, and everyone's been able to come together to secure funding and put in their own capital to deliver projects. There's quite a lot of money available under ESABS. It's good amounts of money per property to really support the cost of installations. So the standard grant that's available for an eligible household is between £7,000 and £8,000 based on the type of house. The various uplifts available for extreme fuel poverty. So I'm not going to go into the eligibility for the difference between poverty and extreme fuel poverty today, but that can actually uplift the grant per property to £12,000, and that can actually go up to £14,000 if that's in a remote, rural or island location. There's also uplifts available to support a whole house approach. Last year there was the introduction of an additional £6,000 per property for extra heating and microgeneration measures. So that's additional £6,000, again £8,000 if you're in a remote, rural or island location. So that could mean that you've got up to £18,000 potential per property. I think it's actually up to about 22,000 if you're in these remote, rural and island locations. So if you had a household where you had an extreme fuel poor tenant and you needed a range of fabric first type insulation measures and perhaps solar PV, battery storage or air source heat pump, it's quite a considerable sum of money that's there. Now, one of the challenges with this is that the grant funding is only available to local authorities. So housing associations and private sector organisations can't go and bid or apply for this. What you can do though is engage with your local authority and take proposals to them. One of the things that you will find is if you've got a challenge that's preventing you from installing your measures at your property because there's council houses or private housing in the area, the local authority will most of the time have the same challenge. So partnership approaches are welcome and there is lots of experience of them being delivered. One of the points to note on that is timescales. So the timing of this isn't brilliant for promoting apps. So the new grant scheme, the guidance will be launched any day now, and it's likely that housing councils will have to bid for the funding or apply for the funding sometime within the next month to 6 weeks. The challenge there is that you'll find that they'll already have a good idea of what they're doing or have that completely nailed down. So probably if you're speaking to them now, what you're doing is you're talking about planning for future projects. Or it might be the case that someone can add this in as a contingency. The Scottish Government do ask for that. So if there's some underspend across the programme or if there's some additional funding that becomes available, you might have an ability to react to that. Now, one that's specifically for social housing providers is the Social Housing Net Zero Heat Fund. So again, this is a Scottish Government scheme. Again, quite a big sum of money. It's about £200 million over the next 5 years, so around about £30 million a year. And the main purpose of this project is to support social landlords to install zero emission heating systems and energy efficiency measures across their existing stock. So it's for social housing projects across Scotland that effectively contribute to the achievement of our ambitions for Scotland and to achieve net zero emissions by 2045. So there's another match funding. Match funded fund. The grant intervention rates that you can receive are between 45 and 50%. It has to be 50% match funded, so you've got to put 50% of the money back in, but that can actually come from 30% loan funding and a minimum of 20% of the project costs have to come from your own capital or agreed private financing. And it's quite an interesting approach. I've been seeing this more and more lately with these government funds, particularly the social housing ones, that they don't have an end date for submissions. They open, and this one's the case that it's open now. It's first come, first served. It's rolling applications that are assessed once per quarter, and once the money's gone, it's gone. So it is one of those schemes where it is good to act fast because it's first come, first served. But actually, if you need a little bit more time to plan and get things done, there's ample opportunity throughout the year. This fund is broken into two main themes. So there's your zero emission heating for social housing across Scotland. These projects can contain fabric first type measures as well, but the focus is on the heating technology. And the second is fabric first energy efficiency only projects, where you have to demonstrate a commitment to applying to installing zero emission heating at some point down the line. As the name of the fund suggests, the heat fund, all the main measures are related to heating. So heat pumps of all kind are in there: air source, ground source and water source, biomass boilers, connections to existing heat networks. It also includes high heat retention storage heaters as well. There is a caveat though that they'll only be considered eligible if they're used in conjunction with other with solar panels, other sources of renewable electricity generation, battery storage. If its projects are just connected directly through to the grid and nothing else and just the high heat storage retentions, they'll not be considered eligible. There's also secondary energy conservation measures available under the scheme. So if you're installing some zero emission heat solutions, you can also look at installing solar panels, battery storage and thermal storage. And with the theme 2, I'm not going to go through every measure that's available under there, but it's all insulation measures. Some of the other ones that are not insulation that come up is wastewater heat recovery system, thermostatic radiator valves. And it's for capital ready projects only. There's no fund for developing feasibility studies or business cases under this particular fund, but this does allow me to seamlessly link to the next fund that we're going to talk about, which is the Social Housing Net Zero Heat Fund Development Fund. Now this is just really shiny and new. It was only announced on the 21st of February, so it's just out in the last couple of weeks, and it's intended to be a catalyst for social housing providers to develop their plans for retrofit for their stock to meet the zero emission targets. It's designed to support the social housing sector to do deep dive analysis of housing stock and really use the information that's been gathered to support and strengthen a future application to the Net Zero Heat Fund. This one is available to social housing providers. Again, it's available between 50% and 100% off those development costs. It can be used to develop investment grade business plans, review the organisation's housing stock, and to set out a decarbonisation strategy. It can be used to cover internal or external professional fees for receiving professional advice, producing feasibility studies, cost analysis, technical survey, and it does say there'll be some costs covered towards the relevant tenant engagement. So I guess they may be testing the water and finding out what people need and how they feel about it. So its applications are open at the moment. Expressions of interest can be submitted, and the Scottish Government's e-investment team will contact them back to discuss that. And all development work should be fully completed by 31st of October 2022. So relatively short timescale, but you might already have a project where you're just about to launch into this kind of thing, or maybe it's planned for a year or two down the line where you could pull that forward. The next fund that we were going to talk about today is the Heat Network Fund. This is another new one as well, again, only announced on the 21st of February. Quite a big pot of funding available, 300 million that's been made available over the next parliamentary session to support the development and rollout of zero emission heat networks across Scotland. So the fund aims to stimulate commercial interest, stimulate investment and maximise Scotland's vast potential in the low carbon sector, whilst contributing to the positive progress on reducing Scotland's greenhouse gas emissions. And what I liked in there, they've set out their ambition for what a successful heat network would look like. They want to deliver affordable, clean heat, supporting the delivery of emission reduction and fuel poverty targets. The government want to develop local supply chains and attract new public and private investment. And they want to contribute to the development and operation of an integrated resilient energy system. So these are a few of the kind of requirements. The guidance on this one was quite light, and it's one where there's not an application, it's a registration of interest, and they'll contact you for a preliminary discussion. But what they have stated at the moment is they're looking for large scale, so looking for ambition. They're looking for it to be based in Scotland. They are looking not only to demonstrate carbon reductions, but also a positive social and economic benefit for Scotland. So again, I think there's a lot of opportunity there to link back in with the fuel poverty side of things. It's open to all public and private sector applicants, which was interesting. So this is one of the ones that's not just for social housing. And they will also accept proposals from consortia of organisations as well. There does need to be a lead organisation that takes full responsibility for the management and delivery and all the conditions of funding. But it's an interesting opportunity. All projects need to demonstrate they can be installed and commissioned by March 26. The Scottish Government are going to be running workshops over the next couple of weeks for anyone who's interested to find out more about that. And what they've done is they've also noted what they define as a heat network, and it's the same definition that's used under the Heat Networks Act in Scotland, and it does include for district and communal heating, so both the kind of transfer of heat from one or more heat sources to a building with multiple dwellings in it, or to multiple buildings, so both are supported. So those are the main grant schemes that we wanted to talk about today. Those are some of the biggest opportunities available there for social housing providers to have greater impact on their programmes. What we wanted to talk about now was what can you do to kind of get yourself ready? What can you do to increase your chances for funding opportunities? And this has really just been based on our experience of supporting clients. We've found that it's important to be aware of what's out there, to be ready for them, to be able to demonstrate impact, and to be flexible in your approaches. So it's really important to keep abreast of everything that's out there at the moment. If you're in this session today, you've already taken the first step towards that, but there's lots of other ways to stay up to date with this. The Scottish Government website will publish any news and PR, joining sessions like today. I find LinkedIn really quite useful as well. I follow a variety of public, third and private sector organisations, Energy Saving Trust, Elmhurst, Retrofit Academy. These are just a couple that spring to mind. I'm not deliberately omitting or adding anyone in there. And also, there's also lots of external support as well. So there's many organisations like M4 who are doing the legwork and doing sessions like today. So Readiness then. Sometimes these grant schemes can be kind of short turnaround. As much as they're rolling applications with a lot of them now, it's good to get in there quite quickly. If you're just starting out from scratch, the day that you read the press release about a new fund, it can be very, very challenging to get ready in time. So the best way to maximise your opportunities is to have projects identified and all the data ready. Easier said than done. So how do you do that? It's important to carry out analysis of your housing stock. Really important to know what you're working with, what's your kind of base level of energy efficiency you're starting from, construction types, heated types, insulation levels. We also think it's worthwhile knowing about all your other compliance requirements as well to support your investment planning, stock condition, fire safety. Again, it's worth knowing that if you're going to need scaffolding up, you can knock out as many of these measures and maintenance and installation needs as you can at the same time. ISH2 analysis, which of your properties are and are not meeting those standards. A lot of housing associations and councils will have that in place now due to the requirement to have APCs completed. But I think the challenging part sometimes can be the modelling. So which energy conservation measures are possible? What range of options and what combinations would you need to see to get each of your properties to ISH2 compliance? And importantly, what is the estimated cost of that? So if you've got that kind of analysis done, got some projects in place, got a bit of a plan for the next 2, 5, 10, 30 years, that can all really help you to be ready to react to these funding opportunities. One of the other important things to be able to do to maximise your chances, was these are quite competitive, you will be going up against other organisations, is really to be able to demonstrate impact. So it's not enough to just say, this is going to help us meet ISH2, this is going to make our houses a bit warmer. It's really important to quantify exactly what your expected outcomes will be. You know, how much, what are you anticipating in terms of carbon emission and energy usage reductions? It's good to be able to multiply that to highlight the multiple agendas that you contribute into. Talked about this before, the fuel poverty and the energy efficiency side of things go hand in hand. So you could be highlighting the expected monetary savings to tenant bills, or you could be highlighting an existing issue which is really having an impact on the quality of life for tenants in a certain area that this project is really going to drill into and help resolve. And the Scottish Government have been putting in a lot more emphasis in the last couple of years on the measurement and verification of your expected outcomes as well. They really want to be able to see that what was planned and the money that's been invested, what has actually come out of that. So really important within those to set out exactly how you'll be monitoring both technical and social monitoring of your actual versus expected outcomes. And it's also worth highlighting what the impact of the grant is going to be on delivery as well. You know, how is that grant going to help you as an organisation have greater impact than you would have had done if you didn't have the grant funding? And finally, flexibility. Plans are great, they help us all out, but it is important to be quite agile in your approach to that planning. You might find that you have a project that's scheduled for 2 or 3 years down the line, but suddenly a pot of fund comes up and it's just too great a chance to miss out on. So having that flexibility and that openness to shuffling things about, or it might be you've got a project that's just about ready, but you just need to bolt another little bit on, like some enhanced tenant engagement, or maybe remove something that's a little bit out of favour at the moment. And I think that flexibility also comes along with your investments as well. What I mean by that is that whole spend to save consideration. You might have some higher upfront development costs, but it's going to set you up for that higher success in being able to secure the funding later down the line. Now, what I'm going to do at this stage is I am going to hand over to my colleague Dave, who introduced you at the start today. Dave's going to say a little bit about the next couple of slides. He's going to cover 2 of the case studies and a little bit on M4 and what our role has been.
Thank you very much, Gary. So I'm going to show you 2 examples now, or case studies that we've worked on recently. The first one is for North Glasgow Homes. We called this one the Phase 1 project, and if you were looking at any of our social media posts over COP26, you can see that we were pretty busy obviously promoting this project on behalf of the Scottish Government. It's a huge project. It's a project that I'm really proud to have been part of. And without further ado, I don't need to do any more talking because my team have done a fantastic job pulling together a video that'll show you what the project was all about.
Okay, and I think this is going to play sound out, but Dave, you might give me a little shout if it doesn't work.
Will do.
Our project in Springburn is currently seeing 6 25-storey tower blocks undergo a £25 million retrofit project to upgrade its heating system and improve fire safety. These blocks were built in the 1960s and the existing heating systems are nearly 20 years old. Our work will see the blocks benefit from the installation of a new district heat network and will make them some of the most energy efficient tower blocks in the UK. The air source heat pumps will be mounted on the roof of the tower blocks, supported on a Bigfoot system to spread the load. The pump sets installed will be capable of circulating up to 2,000 litres of water per second around the building. This low temperature heat network is being controlled by a cutting-edge artificial intelligence platform, which will regulate temperatures to meet the demands of the building, operating between 45 to 55 degrees Celsius. From the plant room, holes are being cored through each of the drying rooms on all 24 floors to allow the district heat main to be run alongside the new boosted cold water main, fire sprinkler, pipework and electrical containment. Alongside installing the new heating systems, our expert team has also been providing residents with one-to-one support and advice on how to use the systems, including how they can work to reduce their heating bills and keep their homes warmer. This has led to a significant reduction in heating bills for residents, working towards getting them out of fuel poverty and hugely improving their quality of life. The tower blocks have already benefited from the retrofit of external wall insulation to reduce heat loss through the build fabric. In one case, one resident is now saving over £400 per quarter on her energy bills and told our team that her house is warmer than ever before. Overall, this project will save 680,000 kilograms of CO2 and will reduce electricity consumption by 70%, placing less demand on the electrical network and also making heating bills cheaper for tenants. The work involved in this huge project was possible due to receiving funding from the Scottish Government's Social Housing Net Zero Heat Fund. We believe that if works like this can be funded and replicated across the country, we will begin to see life-changing alterations in both social and public housing and the way that energy is used.
I'm sure you'll all agree when you look at the project, the scale and the magnitude of it was quite immense. And I think, you know, we talked about that sort of prior preparation and planning prior to the application was submitted to the Scottish Government. That was about 4 years long. So, you know, feasibility studies are really important to get these type of projects up to a level of a level where we can think that is ready to go, almost what we call, you know, oven ready projects. The next project I'm going to show you is slightly sort of smaller, well, a lot smaller, significantly smaller, but the same process is followed again. We're working with Grampian Housing Association up in Aberdeen at the moment, and we were successful in an application bid for Mackenzie Gardens. This is quite an interesting project and another one that I'm really interested to see how it evolves. Because it's a pilot project that's going to aim to prove the viability in the replacements of gas boilers. Now, there's a huge challenge at the moment out there because, first of all, EPC data doesn't really give enough benefits for switching from gas boilers to air source heat pumps, etc. And we know that that's going to change in the new SAP calculations that are going to come out, hopefully. But still, we want to look at this from a design perspective and see whether the combination of air source heat pumps, solar panels and battery storage could have a dramatic impact in the cost of heating these homes. The numbers look quite interesting. So let me talk about a little bit more. So the site overall has got 23 properties. And that's between sort of flats and homes, like single semi-detached properties. We've identified the following ECMs: a communal air source heat pump system. It'll have solar PV, like I mentioned, with battery storage. We're going to look at the insulation upgrade. It's currently benefiting from cavity wall insulation, but through our retrofit assessments, we've identified potential slumping in the actual insulation. So we're going to look at tackling that, as well as putting enhanced insulation in the roof spaces and also on the floors, in the ground floor. Those measures themselves, and obviously the way that you do the calculations, gives a real outcome in terms of carbon savings, but also potential savings to tenants as well. This whole project, and as I said, because it's a bit of a pilot project, we want to try and use the data of before, during and after of the project, and that's where measurement and verification comes in. So about 2 weeks ago we installed sensors in all the properties, and we're going to be monitoring temperature, humidity and CO2 over the next 18 months to see what the actual benefits are of the system. What we're hoping to see is that there will be a marked reduction in terms of costs to tenants, and without being a dramatic impact in terms of how people are living in their properties. We've managed to secure £300,000 for these properties. The overall project is around about 600k. and we expect the project to save tenants around about £145 per annum at the moment, compared to their existing gas costs at the moment. And that's not taking into account, you know, the future of what gas looks like in terms of pricing as well. So a really interesting project. You'll be able to keep an eye on this one as it progresses as well, because as I said, it is a pilot project, and we do hope to be able to use the data to help support others in that journey as well. Gary, I'll let you talk about the next case study.
So the next case study is not an M4 case study. It's a project that's being delivered by the City of Edinburgh Council. The reason I wanted to mention it though, it's a real life example of social housing funding and private fuel poverty funding being combined to deliver greater impact. So although M4 didn't deliver this project, I was involved in this in my previous employment, from generating the kind of the concept through developing a proposal and writing the special project application to the Scottish Government, which was approved as well. So I think it was 2018-19, it might have been 2019-20. There was a couple of rounds of the Scottish Government's Decarbonization Fund, which has been replaced now through LCITB, Net Zero, Heat Fund, those kind of projects. That was delayed quite a bit because of COVID, which I can't remember exactly when we secured the funding. But through the Decarbonization Fund, which was just for social housing providers, what we proposed to do was to install solar PV and battery storage to around about 112 City of Edinburgh Council properties. They're all located in Kirkliston, and they're properties that are on the gas main. They're properties that have had various energy conservation measures installed before the Fabric First approach has truly been done here. But what we were finding is there's still quite a lot of instances of fuel poverty in the area. Kirkliston's quite a funny town, but quite common as well. You've got a really kind of historic original part of the town, lots of stone built properties. You've got your kind of like 50s, 1950s, 1960s kind of built ex-council estates, a lot of council housing, but a lot of private and PRS now. And then newer, more affluent areas of the town with newer builds as well. So there's a real range of different circumstances, but there's definitely fuel poverty there. So within the project, as I said, solar PV, battery storage onto these properties, but we brought in an element of innovation as well. So what we did is we were also procuring a third-party agent who would come in and they would manage the battery network that was created. They'd be collecting lots of data about usage, generation, draw from the grid, draw from the battery, charging the battery. And they were also going to use that data to explore the possibility of a percentage of the battery being utilised by the local authority, and which could be discharged back to the grid. So that could help when there's peak demand, you know, balancing that demand on the grid. But also potentially as well, there's some thought there about whether there's a revenue stream, because obviously there's tariffs there for back to the grid. But also these would be optimised for the tenants as well. There'll be a lot of learning around tenant behaviour, tenant usage, and trying to set it up best, and also future-proofing them. Time of use tariffs when they come into effect is potentially setting them up so that they've got the system in place and the hardware and the communication and everything there to take advantage of that if they needed to. So that was the first part of the project. Now our approach then to delivering the private bit was a little bit reactive. We got the funding through the Edinburgh Council through the Decarb Fund. The Scottish Government then introduced a special project category under ESABs. And the purpose of that is to allow you to be able to apply for funding for things that are not currently funded under ABS or under ECO. You just have to be able to demonstrate better what it is you're doing, the appropriate of it, and what the impact is. So we instantly seen an opportunity there, because what had been happening is we've been installing the solar panels in this area. This was one of the first installations that we carried out under this programme at all. After lockdown, there was a few void properties we managed to get in there, and right from that point, the private housing, the tenants and the owner occupiers in the area were really excited. They were overwhelmed by the amount of interest there was in this. So we got right on there. I spoke to the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government really liked the idea, really liked that greater impact across the whole community, and as I say, we were successful in securing the funding. So I don't know the final numbers there, because unfortunately I've moved on from supporting that particular project now. But when I was working there, we had, within a couple of weeks, with at least 50 tenants coming to speak to us, and we were looking to try and get about 100 on board with that. So a real world example of how social housing, and fuel poverty funding for private households can be brought on board. If you can find ways to lever eco-funding into your project or anything else, even better. So that's Kirkliston. So if you're ever driving out off Edinburgh on towards the M9 or coming out of Newbridge, if you have a look over on your right, Kirkliston rises up above the hill. My family are sick of us driving past and saying I was involved in that. If anyone else is involved in housing and construction projects, you probably bother your friends and family the same thing. So I'm going to hand back over to Dave now, who's going to talk a bit about M4 and what it is we do to support all of this.
Thanks, Gary. So over the past 5 years, our consultants have been working closely with housing providers, local authorities and other public sector organisations to provide a range of services that have helped probably about 15,000 properties across Scotland in terms of fuel poverty and just making them more energy efficient. But what drives our passion is our crazy goals. If you've ever read the book, I would definitely recommend Googling that and getting involved. Our crazy goal is quite a bold, crazy goal. Eliminate fuel poverty, save lives and improve the health and well-being of social housing tenants in Scotland. Yes, it's crazy and it's bold. And I would say that, a lot of people have said to me, well, that's completely unachievable. But to be honest, that's the challenge that we're looking for. It's what drives our decision making in terms of a business. It's what drives our own personal development and our training for our teams. And it's what we all are passionate about. That's what we get up in the morning for, and this is what we do. So we implement practical, progressive solutions. We've got a hugely experienced team that are really enthusiastic about delivering this type of work. And everything that we do, we remain truly devoted to that crazy goal. You want to move to the next slide for me, please, now, Gary? So in terms of some of the things that we can do, well, like I said, we support local authorities and housing associations to secure funding by providing a range of services. We can provide energy performance certification and retrofit assessments, because retrofit assessments is probably going to be the new kid on the block over the next couple of years. Funding is going to require a more in-depth assessment about those properties as we move forward. But what I would say, though, is the amount of information that's captured in an EPC is truly remarkable. It's amazing. It's an amazing data gathering exercise, which is underutilized from my experience within social housing. If you use that data, you can really interrogate and understand your housing stock performance. So really, it's not just a piece of paper that you put on the wall or give to your tenant when they move in. You should really be looking at the data in the background and using that and exploiting that to better understand the challenges that you're facing. Our surveyors have been out delivering stock condition surveys now for years. And our data team is able to transform that data to make sure it fits within your own housing management systems. That's often quite a challenge, from getting the data from a stock condition report and then getting it into your housing system sometimes can be quite a challenge. Another area which is really important is EASH2 modelling. I know Gary brought that up at the beginning of the discussion, and I think just without labouring on that point too much, I would say that this is probably the most strategic, important challenge that social housing and local authorities have faced and will face over the next 10 years. You've got that huge challenge anyway of developing your 30-year investment plan. But a lot of people are failing to recognise that there is going to be a huge investment requirement for EASH2 as well. So we're working with local authorities and housing providers at the moment to almost shoehorn that EASH2 risk within the investment programme. And believe me, it's a huge amount of risk. I think on average at the moment across the stock that we've analysed, you're looking at around about £8,000 to £9,000 per property requirement for energy conservation measure work. So again, don't be underestimated about the importance of looking at EASH2. And as Gary mentioned, in terms of funding, which will be a big kickstarter for all of these projects, it's really important that you start thinking about those funding opportunities now and early as possible. Another part of that is looking at how we can take the data that we collect. So EPC data, you can download it as an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV file. Likewise for your stock condition information, but it's about trying to visualize that. We've got a data team that are able to visualize or take that data and make it more accessible for people to use and analyze. And the beauty of that is it gives you an opportunity, you know, as you can see on the screen there, that's a 30-year investment plan broken down into the categories that you're looking at, which will give you opportunities then to look at it on a either annual basis, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, or right up to the 30-year plan. And that helps your asset investment teams to be able to plan and do the work that needs to be done. And likewise, you might want to start thinking about integrating that EASH2 data profile into that investment plan and dashboard as well. Other part of the jigsaw puzzle that we can offer as well is we can do modelling with the EASH2 data. So what I'm showing you here is pretty straightforward. This is data collected from EPCs for North Glasgow homes. What we've done is we've basically created a heat map, and as you can see on the screen, the white is basically the worst performing areas within their stock. The brief to us as an organisation was we want to find the next project. Obviously, we've delivered the phase 1 project and phase 2 under the heat fund funding, and now they're looking for the next one. So what we've done is we've been able to look at the EPC data, identify an estate, and we're now looking at energy conservation work for this area as well, potentially through the social housing net zero heat fund, or might even potentially be looking at the district heat fund as well, which again is brand new, but this type of project would benefit from that. I think what I would close in saying from our point of view, and what we're really proud of, is that to date we have managed to obtain over £16 million in grant funding for our clients, and we're already working with several other clients to be able to look at opportunities for them as well. And whilst we're not the only organisation out there, I think what's really important, and Gary mentioned it, it's about that partnering, identifying suitable contractors that are able to do the work for you, identifying consultants that understand what's happening in terms of the funding, consultants that might be able to support you with the feasibility studies so that you've got them shelf ready projects to go once the funding rounds come about as well. So we're really proud of that, and that's what M4 does in a nutshell.
Thanks, Dave. So that's the end of our that's the end of our prepared slides and discussion for today. And what we wanted to do is to just to open up the virtual room now for any questions that you might have on what you've heard today, or any of the challenges that you might be trying to overcome yourself.
And just to let you all know, you should be able to unmute your microphones and video if you want to ask any questions. I was expecting lots and lots of questions today.
It's a one question minimum, everyone. I suppose, is there anyone out there who has had difficulty securing funding before, either because a funds came up and not been able to get ready in time, or perhaps you've applied for something and not got it? No. Quite a quiet room today. I found myself. Oh, there's I think that's John Smith from South Lanarkshire Council's got his hand up. Hi, John.
Hi, how you doing? I thought I'd just ask a wee. All right, Dave. I thought I'd ask a wee question just because nobody else was. See, under the Social Housing Net Zero Heat Fund, talking about the theme 2, do you know what sort of projects? I know that it's May is the next round, I think, for that. For those bids to go in, what sort of projects they would be looking at under that, the Fabric First energy efficiency? I know I was at a workshop, but it was back in August, I think, where they were looking at those, and I know they had the first phase of the theme 2 was to be delivered by January this year, a really short time scale. But looking at the next round that's open, as I say, I think it's May. But I'm just wondering what sort of things would we be looking at? Would we be looking at maybe complementing some of our ESABs, where certainly one of our ex-head of service was always making the point that there was a lot of funding available for owner occupiers under ESABs, but not so much so for for social. So we were looking at potentially a bid for theme 2 to complement our ESABs projects, but funding the social element of that. Is that something that would be considered, do you think?
I think it would be. I think one of the key things is that there's a demonstrable commitment to installing low carbon or no carbon emission heating systems. So I think it would need to be demonstrated that your plan was at some point down the line to install one of these types of heating systems, and what you wanted to do at the moment was take advantage of the fact that you're delivering an ABS scheme in the area, all the kind of economies and the good stuff that goes with combining those types of projects together. So I do believe that that is the type of project they want to fund. It is those fabric first only projects with a view to gearing up those houses for a full net zero heat fund application. So I think they would, John.
We might be a wee bit sort of back to front on that, because some of the project we're thinking of has already got air source heat pumps in it, and it was a follow-up. Is the obviously I'm saying fabric first, but it's actually the second because we've already looked at you know, low emissions heat for those ones, and they've got air source heat pumps on them already. So
that's an interesting one, because although you're not preparing the house to take the heating system, what you are doing is you're I mean, I guess they're suitable for the heating system in the first place if you installed it. What you're doing is you're just maximising the benefit of that heating system even further. So I think those would be considered, but I'm not sure. But one of the things I do find quite good about the Scottish Government is the key contacts that are there, in my experience, have always been quite open to that discussion. They do want to hear proposals, they do want to hear about innovation, and it's good if you can, if you're working with them, develop a bit of a relationship where you can just pick up the phone and ask them any weird and wonderful questions, and they're able to give you a nod whether they think it's worthwhile. That could be quite useful for if you're on the fence about whether you want to invest in some of the feasibility studies for certain things. I would recommend that you do just have a chat with them first, because they can kind of give you a yes or no as to whether it's something they would like to see.
That's great.
Yeah,
thanks.
I'll jump in as well. I think when it comes to the social housing net zero heat fund, there's two key themes that I'm looking for in any application. So first of all is the feasibility. So the feasibility looks at technology options or options in terms of the work that you're going to undertake, and the feasibility really wants to take a whole house approach in terms of the solutions it's going to offer, and even potentially exclude some measures that you might have considered in the first place. A good example is a lot of the geothermal stuff, which we often talk about. We often exclude it because the civils and the technical challenge around it just doesn't make the project viable. When it comes to the fabric first approach, what's really interesting is one of the key things that you've got to submit as part of not only your feasibility work, but also as your application, is the carbon savings. So we now know that a fabric first approach probably has a significant impact in terms of overall consumption requirements. So again, as you're carrying out your design work and understanding what the new U value calculations will be, and I put into the chat as well, we've even explored with the Scottish Government upgrading of windows to triple glazing, which they've accepted as part of that secondary measure work under the fabric first approach. So again, if you think about it as a whole house approach, you've got investment programs for window replacement. If you're going to capture, now is the time to think about using PAS 2035. Now is the time to think about, if you're going to be doing conservation measures, you know, capturing it properly, you know, making sure that the windows are replaced with triple glazed, that they're actually repositioned to make sure that they're on the outer facing of the insulation. You know, all of these things that we might have neglected previously as as a direct result of that race to the bottom to get the work done as cheaply as possible. We now need to take that into place. But yeah, John, I'm fairly certain that all of the stuff that you're considering, providing that it's supported with a feasibility study, would be an accepted measure in terms of the application that you potentially would put forward.
And I'm wondering if that conversation there with John has got anyone else thinking. Is there any other questions or discussion, or even if you want to make a statement or have a wee moan about the industry that we work in, I'm sure this is the place to do it.
And I'd also say, if anybody has got questions that they want to ask us, but not during the webinar, feel free to drop myself and Gary a quick email, or get in touch via a phone call. We'll be more than happy to assist and have a chat.
Absolutely. The other thing I would say as well is that all of the information that's here today, we were talking about our experience and how to apply it, but all the facts and figures, they're all out there and publicly available. So what I will do is I'll put an email together with links to all the sources and distribute them around the group as well. And if you do think of any questions, more than happy for you to come back to Dave and I. There's a link there to our website where we've got information and case studies, and we're both pretty active on LinkedIn as well, as is M4.
Good stuff. Well, I think you survived your first webinar, Gary. So first of all, well done, mate. That was really good. Quite informative. I'm sure everyone will agree. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you all again next month. I have no idea what's in the agenda. Hopefully, Stuart will frantically drop that into the chat in a second. But it'll be something that might help you guys move forward. OK. Thanks very much, everyone, and we'll speak to you soon.